Good day. Speaking of the expulsion of the Acadians, which is a sad history of state sponsorship ethnic cleansing in North America that began with the story of the British expulsion of the Acadians in 1755. Oui, s'abonnez-y bien. After the French lost control of Acadia in 1710, the British, increasingly uncomfortable with the bond between the Acadians and the Mi'kmaq, went so far as to ban social interaction between the two groups. This leads me to the history of the extermination, complete and total extermination of the Beothuk people. I will put the link in the video description. The Beothuk people of Newfoundland were the first indigenous people to come into contact with Europeans, contact that tragically set the stage for their eventual extinction. The Beothuk population over its 2,000-year history was never robust. Historians estimate the number at between 500 to 1,000 at the time of European contact in 1497 when John Cabot arrived on the island. By the way, Cabot was a Knight Templar. Less than 350 years later, the Beothuk were extinct. Even though there were never a lot of people, they should not have been extinct. They should have increased in number. They were a hunter-gatherer nation who lived and hunted in extended family groups. For most of the year they lived inland, but in the summer and early fall they would move to camps at the mouths of rivers to fish. The summer-fall camps were the times for cultural celebration, sharing of news, trading, and arranging marriages. In the winter they moved inland, where they set up the offenses, which directed the migrating caribou herds to hunting areas. They did not overfish or overhunt any species, and never during the calving or spawning periods. The first wave of Europeans who arrived to harvest the bounties of the sea did not establish settlements, but rather had seasonal camps, returning to their homelands before winter. The Beothuks were able to coexist with this seasonal presence and appear to have had a mutually beneficial relationship based on a system of silent bartering. This was on a system of silent bartering in which one group would leave items of interest to the other group at a customary spot and vice versa. The Beothuk actually benefited from the Europeans as they scoured the seasonally abandoned fish camps to collect rope, nets, canvas, nails, hooks, metal, and tools, which they fashioned into tools such as arrowheads, lance points, harpoon blades, awls, and hide scrapers. they became very adept at metal work. Firearms, however, they didn't touch, which left them at a distinct disadvantage in future disputes. Peaceful seasonal coexistence came to an abrupt end in the 17th century when Europeans established settlements on the coast into traditional gathering points of the biotoc, which had an immediate and profound impact on the biotoc. Their nomadic lifestyle was dramatically disrupted as increasingly they were cut off from the sea, a vital food source. As the European population increased, so did their hunting and trapping of fur-bearing animals, which further impacted the biotoc. The migratory routes of the caribou were disrupted and the herds were severely over-hunted. The biotoc retaliated and violent confrontations erupted as the biotoc struggled to defend their lifestyles and very existence, but they were using arrows which were no match for firearms, so these confrontations unfailingly resulted in high death rates of the biotoc. In addition, the Mi'kmaq were encouraged by the Europeans to join them in dislodging the biotoc from their traditional lands. Viewed by some settlers as savages, less than human, and as a threat to the safety of their settlements, the biotoc were systematically hunted with the intent to eradicate all of them from the island. This period of viciousness coincided with a series of extreme winters which further decimated the biotoc. They slowly starved as their traditional hunting and fishing grounds were taken from them. They struggled to maintain their deer fences and hunting practices, but due to their diminished number they were unable to do so. Those other European introductions, tuberculosis, smallpox, measles, further devastated the population. Government leaders grew concerned about the rumors they heard regarding the plight of the biotoc. In a display of extreme naivety, they offered a reward for the capture of live biotocs, the intent being that the captives would be well treated, would learn to view the Europeans as benign, and once convicted of this view would be allowed to return to their families and spread the word. The biotocs would learn to trust them and would move closer to the European settlements where they could receive help. There were two fundamental problems with this plan. Biotoc beliefs stipulated that if they made peace with the Europeans, their spirits would be denied access to Spirit Island, and the offer of the reward actually accelerated the demise of the biotocs as the settlers took it to mean captive at any cost. What little traditional knowledge there is on record is due to the offerings of the Shanau Dinit, the last remaining biotoc who was found starving along with two other women in the spring of 1823. The other two women died shortly thereafter of tuberculosis, but Shanau did it survive. She was placed in the care of William Cormac, a merchant philanthropist. Cormac encouraged Senna with it to record her knowledge of her people, her culture, and language. Shanna died of tuberculosis on June the 6th, 1829. The drawings of this brave young woman, the last Beothuk on earth, form the foundation of our scanty knowledge of the people lost forever. There is an article and short video you might find interesting. I will put the link in the video description. Thanks for listening. Oui, c'est moi, bien. After the French lost control of Acadia in 1710, the British increased interaction between the two groups. This leads me to the history increasingly uncomfortable with the bond between the Acadians and the Mi'kmaq went so far as to ban social. Good day. Speaking of the expulsion of the Acadians, which is a sad history of state sponsorship ethnic sin in North America, that began with the story of the British expulsion of the Acadians in 1755.